and welcome everyone to Everything is Attitude Late Edition.
Again.
Again.
We do try though, don't we, Al? We do try.
We do. If I never thought it would take this long to find a Starbucks. I'm driving along a main road, but there actually is not a Starbucks at every corner, unbeknownst to me. welcome, Rosemary.
Hi, Al. Welcome everybody to Everything is Attitude. Welcome to my co-host Al Pisano, and we have I don't know if it's an interesting topic, but it's certainly a topic that fascinates me, and it's certainly a topic that I think a lot of people might be interested in, because the topic is very simply learning when to say no.
Well, Rosemary, why is that so important?
Well, let me tell you first of all, when I first began my work as a spiritual medium and healer, I mean, I was very idealistic, to be honest. I'm still a little bit idealistic. I like to think everybody's nice, and I like to think everybody does things for the right reasons. We know, don't we, that that's not always the case, but I like to think that. But when I first began on this journey, on my journey, so many years ago, so many years ago now, because I felt that I had such an incredible gift, and I also felt, as I still do feel now, that it was something that, you know, I was given this gift, meant to share it with as many people as I could, which basically left me wide open. So rather than sort of thinking about myself and what the stress and the strains and all the rest of it might do to me, it never occurred to me in the beginning that I might get tired, or I might struggle with issues, what have you. But I was so intent on helping other people. So if I got a call, which I often did, you know, my brother's in the hospital, can you come? My uncle's, you know, it just been in a car crash, can you come? My mother's dying of cancer, can you come? And as a spiritual healer, people call you at all times of the day and night. And luckily for me, I'd built up a wonderful team of people, a wonderful team of healers who were absolutely brilliant. And all I had to do was make a call to them when necessary and say, you know, we need to be here, or we need to be there. And there was always at least one person to go with me to these different places I was called to. However, when people call you in emergencies, that's one thing. But then, of course, there are people who will call and say, after you've been to the hospital, after they've recovered, after they go home, and they call and they say, I'm feeling really depressed, can you come? And sometimes it would be 11 or 12 o'clock at night, and I might have been working all day long, and then I get in my car and go out again. It never occurred to me until quite a while through all of this, that I actually could say no. It never occurred to me to say no, because after all, I was given this gift and I needed to share it. And that, you know, it was God's gift to me, and I needed to share that gift, and it was important to me that I do it. However, at some point, I came to the realization that I'm just one little person, and that if I'm not getting sleep, and if I'm not eating, because I'm always going off somewhere or another, or helping somebody else. So when I say, yes, I'll be right there, it means that I've just left my dinner on the table and gone off to see somebody or another. Or it means that in the middle of the night when I'm sleeping, I wake up and I have to go out again and maybe spend 3 or 4 hours with someone before I can go back home, not to sleep, but to continue working. It occurred to me that if I'm not very careful, I'm going to get sick. So there were two things. So there was that. There was also being amongst, initially when I first began working, being amongst other people who were healers, and watching them and watching people because I was young at the time, watching people who seemed to be old to me, 40, 50 years old, but they, they were doing the same thing. Can you come here? Can you go there? Can you please help my mother? Can you help my child? Can you, and of course they would say yes. But it occurred to me that so many of the healers that I came into contact with were sick themselves. And they were sick themselves because they were giving so much of their energy to everybody else, and they were not taking care to keep some for themselves. So I learned, sort of fairly early on, that even though I didn't like to say no, and even though it was very hard for me to say no, I had to say no. I had to say no for my own survival. I had to say no because, uh, honestly, if I wore myself out and exhausted myself, then I'm not good for anybody at all. So when I began my sort of my teaching, and I had lots of people come to me wanting to be healers, and so I started taking classes, and eventually we had healing centers, and eventually we had at one point we had 4 healing centers in the UK. The thing that I had to teach my students, because so many people who want to give healing, so many people who work in the field of helping, whether it's in a spiritual sense or whether it's simply just somebody who wants to be a therapist, or wants to be a psychiatrist, or somebody who's a nurse or a doctor or what have you. If you have that feeling that you can really help people, it's very, very, very hard for you to say no. But I teach my healers, and I teach anybody who cares to listen, that you've got to be selfish with yourself first. Not that you're selfish to the point of walking all over everybody else, but you've got to be selfish with your own time. You've got to be selfish with your own energy, because all of those people who are demanding, and the more well known you become, and the more people see the gift that you have, and the more people sort of understand the power of the gift, the more people pull at you. And if you're not careful, people start to feed off of you naturally. So it's not something bad that other people deliberately do to you, but the more you are seen to be good at what you do, the more they want from you and the more they pull at you. And if you're not careful, and if you don't learn to say no, they will destroy you. So I always teach my healers and my students, first and foremost, before you start to look at other people, and before you start to help other people, or before you start to put yourself in somebody else's path, you have to focus on you. You have to focus on your own energy, and you have to make sure that your energy is sufficient, and and strong enough that, fine, give it out, but you've got to keep some for yourself, or you've got to learn how to give back to yourself and how to feed yourself. Otherwise, you become absolutely useless to
And
everybody.
that and that and that doesn't apply to just someone like you, Rosemary, right? It's
No,
it's
it
it's
doesn't.
a it's a caregiver. It's someone who is a mentor or a confidant of somebody that's giving advice. It's a father, a mother, a
A
sister, a
teacher,
brother, a teacher.
a
Yeah,
teacher, a
yeah.
parent, a sibling. In every walk of life, um, there are those people who are natural givers, uh, and then there are those who are put in a position where they feel they don't have a choice. For instance, they are an only child. Let's give for one example, they're an only child and they feel obliged to take care of their parents. But as a lot of people out there will know, listening to this, that's not any easy task. But people feel that they are duty bound to do it. They exhaust themselves. They feel that they should take this on. Very often, people are reluctant to ask for help. They're reluctant to ask other family members for help. They're reluctant to ask churches and hospitals and all that. I mean, there's a lot of places out there that if you ask for help, go to the Salvation Army, for instance. But people feel very reluctant to ask for help because they feel that it's their duty, or in my case, it's their gift, or it's that it's especially if they love a parent or they're the only child. What do we do? with a parent who can't manage for themselves, is sick themselves, has nowhere else to live but your place, what do you do? And so, you know, and my feeling is that you have to learn to say no in order to save yourself, so that you have time for them, so that you can, for the long haul, help that person. Do you understand?
Yeah. So, Rosemary, what happens to a typical person that, say, is just a giving person, right? And either has trouble saying no because they feel bad, they don't want to say no because they don't want to disappoint. Like, the list goes on as far as why people don't want to say no. They don't want to say no to an opportunity and miss something, fear of missing out on something. There's so many different reasons for people to not say no. But what happens to folks when they don't say no? What happens to their life? What happens to their mental state? What happens to them when you don't say no and don't take care of yourself, essentially?
Well, we all know everything is energy. Everything is about energy. The whole universe is about energy. And we all know, as human beings, as individuals, that each of us has energy. Some of us have more energy than others. When I go traveling, for instance, and I'm working and traveling, people have actually, likened me to the little, what is it, the little bunny, continuing, do you know what I mean? The ever-ending bunny.
Energizer Bunny, yes, the
Yeah, that's
Energizer
it, the
Bunny.
Energizer Bunny, because I can keep going, 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 going until there has to be a point where you simply don't go anymore. So when I go traveling, I can keep up that speed, I can keep up that, that energy level, but there's got to be a point where I have to step back and say no, otherwise I'm no use to anybody. My energy is depleted. People become depressed. People become resentful. People become resentful of their parent, who really can't do anything about very much, but because you feel that you're the one responsible and you feel reluctant to bring other people into the situation, you start to get resentful and you start to get angry with the situation. Or, if you're a carer, and you feel overwhelmed by things, you can easily get resentful towards the people who actually you're caring for, and it's not their responsibility to stop asking you. It's your responsibility to draw the line by which they know how far they can go and you know how far you can go. Because if you don't draw the line, if you don't have rules in place, you can literally destroy yourself emotionally, physically, mentally, in every way. You just become so depleted that you're absolutely no use to anyone else.
Right.
And also, you're absolutely no use to your own self either.
and
And
and and things feel like they start to spin out of control too,
sure,
right? Because you can't possibly um, hold on to all of those responsibilities and still take care of what you need to take care of to make sure you're in the right place energy wise, you're in the right place as far as responsibility goes. You have this spiraling effect, and we've all had it happen to us at one point or another. But it's crucial to say no, and I'm still learning it at almost 50 years old to say no, because of situation I'm in or anybody else is in. Hectic life, it's sometimes hard to say no, and for myself it's the I feel bad saying no, or isn't that mean saying no.
well,
But
I think there are a few reasons why people don't say no. I think guilt is a huge one. For parents who spend a lot of time at work or a lot of time earning money or what have you, they feel guilty when the kid asks them to do something and they're absolutely tired out, but they feel obliged. They do it through guilt, or they do it, people. So people say, don't say no because of guilt. They don't say no because they feel that they are the only one who can do this. Little control issues there we have, because a lot of people, and and especially with our kids or with our aged parents or what have you, a lot of people feel that they are obligated. My parent took care of me, and now it's my turn to take care of them, and they truly want to do it. But wanting to do it and being capable physically, mentally, emotionally, uh, to the point of shutting other people out, it's crazy, because you're going to kill yourself. So there are lots of reasons why people don't like to say no. But if you don't say no, then at some point, and this has happened, and I've seen it happen. There was a lady who she was married for a long time, and her husband had a stroke, and he was in a wheelchair, and she would push him, to and from the shops, and to the bingo hall, and to different places, sort of push him in his wheelchair. He's a big guy, and she would push him here, there, and everywhere. And people would say to her, just say the word and we'll come with you, or we'll help you, or we can take him here or here. And she loved him to pieces, completely loved him to pieces. We've had a good marriage. We've had 30 some years, and it's I'm taking care of him. She did it out of love. She did it out of respect for him. She did it out of a need also to, to give him back, to give back to him what he, in some part what he had given to her, because he'd always taken care of her. And, this went on for 2 or 3 years. And she had lots and lots of people come and offer to help, and she would absolutely not take the help. And then one day, as she was wheeling him back in his wheelchair from the bingo or whatever it was that was been to, she dropped like that. Massive heart attack, no chance of recovery. Now, who's going to take care of him now? And he ended up having to go into a home. So instead of her saying to people, "Can you help me?" and there's no shame in it, and I think that's another thing. Don't feel ashamed that you need help. We all need help. To ask for help. If you can't find it anywhere else, the Salvation Army will step right up there. But if you have a church or a community centre, or if you sort of go to the hospital that you're having treatment at, or you're whoever it is having treatment at, you can always find people who will help you. And it's amazing, because that just, for instance, if somebody says, "I'll come and sit with him for a couple of hours once a week," you then, as the carer, you look forward to that 2 hours. That's your free time. You can do with it whatever you want. You can go for a walk to the park, go to bed, watch TV, watch a movie, do whatever it is you want. But you've got something to look forward to. What happens is the stress levels decrease, stress levels come down. You've got something to look forward to. You've got a little bit of respite here. And don't feel guilty about that, because, you're doing the very best that you can. And I think it's important for us all to remember, we are all, after all, only human. If that makes any sense to you.
Well, no, it does, and I think sometimes even ego gets in the way, right? Like you feel
Oh,
like you can do it, you can
yeah,
do everything, and why,
yeah.
I'm not going to say no. They need help, and I can do it, and I can step up, and it's ego driven sometimes, or rewards driven, where you do something because it makes you feel good, and you want to do something else because it makes you feel good. But at the end of the day, if you're like that Energizer Bunny, the Energizer Bunny batteries will eventually run out. They don't show you that on TV, but they will eventually run out. Right?
Oh, they do. Trust me, I know very well. What I used to do is I used to sort of pace myself as best as I could. I go, 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 go. But I knew it would only be for sort of be for 2 weeks or 3 weeks. I knew there was a beginning and an end time. You had that period. So you could keep going because of that. But when we're talking about sort of like if you're in a job and your boss says, "I want you to do this," and you're already overworked, and it's your boss, so you take it on, and then he comes back to you and he says, "Now I want you to do this," and now you're even more overworked. At some point, if you don't say, "I need help with this," and he might ignore you, but at least you've said it. At some point, if you say, "No, I actually can't do that, that is not, I can't do it," if you don't find a way to say no when you are overwhelmed. It will, the responsibility and the weight of that will absolutely crush you. I mean, we all know that with our kids, when we got our kids and we bringing them up, we try to bring them up in the right way. We certainly don't say yes to everything they want. I mean, my daughter, she's an adult. She's got her own child, my grandchild. I still say no to her sometimes. I mean, it's like, she asks me for something and I say no because I'm not able to do it, or I'm feeling tired myself, or what have you. And no, but it was so hard for me, though. I have to tell you, Al, it was so hard for me in the beginning to say no, because I think for a variety of reasons, I didn't want people to think I was mean. I wanted people to think, well,
That's a big one, right? You don't
right,
want to sound mean,
right.
because a lot of times when you say no, and honestly, the longer you wait to say no, the meaner you do sound.
The harder it is. So
uh,
when you do say no, you tend to say no in a more aggressive
more
way.
aggressive way, exactly.
Yeah. So, I didn't want people to think I was being mean. As I say, I have this amazing gift that I truly wanted to share with everyone. So I felt probably some guilt if I said no, because I wasn't, there 24/7 for everybody else.
Yeah, but also the expectation of it too, right, Rosemary?
Oh,
Like if you keep saying the inverse of no, if you keep saying yes, 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 the expectation is that you will do it no matter what the cost. And then
well,
when you do say no, it's like, wait, what are you talking about? You've been doing this for me forever, right?
I know, and that's often when people over the years have really put me on the pedestal. I'm high up there, and the shame of it is that, and the minute I behave in a in a human way, the minute I say no, or the minute they see that I too am capable of, uh, not being particularly nice as far as they're concerned. I mean, or well, she isn't who I thought she was, and it's not me portraying who I who they think I am. It's in their head. They have an impression and an idea of who we are. So if you have a neighbor and you're a good neighbor, the neighbor gets the impression you're always there to help. Hey, if you're going to the supermarket, can you get me some milk? Sure. If you're going here, can you get me such and such? And the minute you say, actually, no, I'm not going there, it's confusing to them because you've always done it before, and suddenly you're tumbling off that pedestal. Suddenly you're not that person who's always helpful and always generous and always, and then
I remember I when I was first moved out to Colorado, it was in a rental, and I was helping out a few of the neighbors, with their driveways with the snow, and this one woman had hurt her knee, and she didn't ask me, but I went over and I cleared out her driveway, and she came out and she said, "Would you mind doing my stoop too, my porch too?"
oh boy, yeah,
So I was like, "Oh yeah, sure, I'll do that too." So people with those expectations, people really do. They just can't almost get outside themselves and say, "Wait, you're doing this for me. Why would that change? Like,
yeah,
why would you say no? I can't do your porch.
I know.
Right? If you're already doing the driveway."
I know, but I mean, in my work, people put me on a pedestal. I'd rather they didn't. I would so much rather they didn't, because I will inevitably fall off it. Inevitably, I'm human. But I think that if you recognize yourself that you are human and that you're only capable of so much, even sometimes just if you can, if even if you could easily say yes, sometimes it's just as well to say no, so that people don't get the impression or the expectation that you're always going to be there for them. Sometimes you have to say no because you want people to stand on their own 2 feet a little bit. Sometimes
That goes to your kids and elderly parents sometimes too. Like, they're capable of more than we give them credit for too sometimes, and uh, they don't even get the chance to show that they're capable if we're catering to their
that's
needs or
right.
catering to our
Yeah,
children's needs. They're
yeah,
not even going to get that chance, right?
right. we know what happens to kids who, who their parents always say yes to them no matter what. The moment somebody says no, they become these awful, awful little human beings. They become, you know, mean and screaming and stamping their feet and so on and so forth, because they're used to having everything that they've asked for. So we know it's not good for our children. So it should, it shouldn't be. It's twofold. You shouldn't say yes to people just because you feel that you should, or that, or because they're asking you. You have to think about it when somebody asks you if you can help them with something. Think carefully before you say yes, and also think about yourself. If I begin to get my neighbours shopping, does that mean that my neighbour's going to expect it from me every day? So, do it the first time, maybe do it the second time, the third time, you just simply say, sorry, I can't make it today. Don't let people get used to you. Don't let, because because then you're enabling them.
And they may get lazy about things that they're
Yeah,
capable of too, right?
yeah, that's
We
right.
we have
But
a couple comments, Rosemary. When just get finish your thought.
well, I was just going to say, but it's really, most importantly, I think we have to consider. I know it sounds extremely selfish, but I encourage selfishness, as long as you're not walking all over everybody else, as long as you're not hurting somebody else deliberately. I encourage my healers to be selfish simply with their own energy, which means being selfish with their time, taking the time to have time for themselves, taking the time to do things that they can enjoy, and learning to say no is very much a part of all of that. Let's have
This is not, the stereotypical husband sitting on the couch and saying no to his wife because he's relaxing and doesn't
right.
feel like doing anything,
No,
or vice versa, that the wife is not doing anything and the husband's going, like, it's not about taking advantage of people by using no.
no,
It's about making sure that you're in a good place and
you're
that
healthy. You're
you're
healthy,
healthy. Right.
mind, body, and spirit.
Exactly. So we have Maggie, Lori, and Nettie are all here.
Hi.
Maggie said, "I have to learn to say no. I'm now sick because I don't say no." Uh, Nettie,
That is the exact same example that I was talking about.
and then we have Nettie. What if you can't? Which we addressed a little bit. What if you can't say no because of work situations? Of course, impacting family responsibilities when help can't be found. So she's bringing up the work piece again, and I think you kind of addressed that. You have to, even at work, you may have an unreasonable boss, but then maybe that's time to find a new job, right? Um,
Yeah.
but
I
a lot
think
of times you can ask, and you could be surprised. Hey, let me see if I can get somebody to team up with you on this, and you may have somebody that's more understanding than you're giving them credit for, too, right?
I think sort of this is about communication and finding the right way to communicate with people, and it's about communicating. In the case of work situation, it's about communicating with your boss. A lot of people in work situations, they just keep doing it and doing it and doing it because they're asked, and more work is piled onto them, more and more work is piled onto them, until they start to get angry and frustrated. And then when they do say something, it comes out as resentful and angry. I'm suggesting that people say something, in the early days when you realize that, somebody's loading on too much for you. If you talk to you, generally people can be reasonable. You go and see your boss and you say, I'd love to do this for you. However, I don't have enough time in the day. Do you have someone who can help me with this? Or can you, give somebody else this part of the job? I'll do what I can. However, I can't do all of it. And I think if you can communicate before you get to the point where you're angry and resentful, or, really feeling irritated by the fact that, that I don't know what she thinks I am, or I don't know what he thinks I am, that that, well, if you don't draw the line, and it's what we said earlier on, if you don't draw the line, it it's people will just, they always say, if you want something done, give it to a busy person. However, that busy person, if they don't draw the line, you just get so overwhelmed and stuff gets piled up. So say something in the early days about, I'd love to do this. However, I either need help or, I don't have time to do this because I'm doing this and this.
And in the defense of the boss that's directing the employee, they may not even know that you're overwhelmed.
Exactly.
They may not have any awareness of that whatsoever, and that's on them a little bit. But if you're not saying, "Hey, listen, I can't, I still haven't finished this project. There's no way I can start this project," they're not going to know that. So that communication has to happen for
Right.
them just to be aware sometimes.
Right. I always tell people who are going into a new job, and especially people who have responsibilities, either in the field of caring or the field of management or whatever it is. I'm going to use one particular example, and it happens to be the example of a big corporate company, where all the people who work in that company, because they started there trying to please, because they started there wanting to impress, they end up working so many hours because they get work piled and piled and piled on top of them and have not said no, and all of a sudden there aren't enough hours in the day, and so people start at perhaps 6 or 7 in the morning. They're still going at 8 or 9 at night. It is ridiculous. So I always say to people, when they go in those positions, they come to me for help and advice. Start as you mean to go on. You go in at 8 and you leave at 5 or 6. There are, of course, those exceptions, but the exception shouldn't become the rule. The exception is, once a month you have to work late, or every other week you have to work late, or something. But the more you do, and especially in large corporations, the more you do, the more those people will expect you to do. So start as you mean to go on. If you are in a job and you don't want to give the job up, find a way to communicate with your bosses and say to them, look, I love this job, and so on and so forth. However, I've only got so many hours in a day, and you know how difficult it is. Talk to the person, explain to them, I don't have time to do this and this. If you want me to do this part properly and thoroughly, then you have to find somebody else to do this part. And I think for the most part, you'll find that bosses aren't ogres. I mean, some of them can be, I know, but mostly bosses aren't ogres. And if you go and talk to them in a reasonable way, don't let it build up until you're angry or resentful and you end up shouting at them or being aggressive or what have you. Talk to them in a reasonable way and figure out a way to make compromises. But if you're about to go into a new job, or you're about to go into a new field, or you're about to get a promotion, start as you mean to go on. Make the rules for yourself. You find what's comfortable for you. We know perfectly well that no one can start at 6 or 7 in the morning and go till 9 at night continually, year after year after year, without the result of bad health, without the result of resentment and anger, without those awful results of
Bad relationships with kids,
yeah,
spouses, girlfriend, boyfriend, significant other.
yeah, wrecked marriages, wrecked relationships. We know that nobody can. We're all human, and I think if we all try to remember that, it's going to be helpful.
So if we have a recipe for saying no, Rosemary, what are some of the ingredients to saying no in a way that's selfish, but not where it's impacting others, where you're saying no just to say no, in other words? Like where's the line?
Okay, I've got my big bowl here because it's a big bowl, right? I'm going to put my ingredients in it. The first ingredient that I'm putting in there is self. That's the biggest ingredient in this situation. Self. Examine what self means, what self needs. So self needs time for themselves. Self needs emotional sustenance. Self needs, happiness, leisure time, whatever it is, joy.
Enjoyment. Yeah.
Yeah. So, look at support self in there, and ask yourself what, and different people need different things. So the recipe here changes with the person. I could not function in my life without being able to laugh. If I'm overworked, if I'm stressed, if I am dealing with a situation where I can't say no. You can always say no, by the way. If you can't say no, or you feel that you can't say no, take a look at what you need. And I certainly, my bowl would have joy, fun, laughter, time for myself, leisure time to read, leisure time for, for cooking and that sort of thing. Those are the things that I need that make me contented, so that when I say yes, I can give my full self and my full energy to whatever it is I'm saying yes to. There are times when you have to say yes and it's a struggle. Don't make it the norm, make it the exception. I mean, sometimes, somebody's in an accident and you're going to get a phone call. You have to come to the hospital right now. You can't look at your recipe and say, "Oh no, I'm reading at the minute," because that would be purely selfish. And so when we talk about selfishness, we're talking about giving to the self energy, giving to the self leisure time, giving to the self
Regularly, right, Rosemary?
yeah, every day, giving to yourself those things that enable you to function, to do your job, to give to other people, to give, to give in a good, positive way, but to not exhaust yourself and not to tire yourself out and not get to the point where you're really resentful. So when I talk about selfishness here, I'm not talking about, no, no, I'm not going to do that. No, I'm not talking about you not helping others. I'm talking about enabling yourself so that you can actually give, and you can give in a positive and a good way, in a powerful way, without depleting who you are and what you are, without depleting your own energy. So certainly in my recipe, it would be the capability of assessing what you're actually saying yes to.
That's really well said too, because you have to have this sort of barometer on what, how often do I say no, how often do I say yes, because it could quickly turn into laziness too, right? And you got to be careful on the other side as well. Another thing I would add is to not dismiss, but just be really aware of those uh, emotions that come in that prohibit you from saying no, like the guilt, like the feeling bad, like the not wanting to miss out on an opportunity, like those kind of things. You really have to be aware of, like, what's driving you to not say no, and to have that awareness is really key in this.
And I think also another really big ingredient here is an understanding that as much as you might want to be the powerhouse, as much as you might want to be that sole person and only you can give to that other person, or only you can control that other situation, be aware you are not alone, and go and find help. So so many people are too proud. So quit that. Go, and again, I can't speak highly enough of the Salvation Army because I love them, but I know there are many, many, many organizations out there other than the Salvation Army. But go find, don't be, don't wear yourself out to the point where you go and seek somebody out because you're desperate. Go and seek somebody out in the beginning. If you know that you're going to have to take on this parent, for instance, if you know you're going to have to take on a group of kids which is too much for you because for whatever reason you're having difficulties, or I mean in my case in this last week, I mean I've had to set aside certain things because stuff went out of my control. My my internet went down, my computer died, my iPad almost blew up on me, so on and so forth. But I know that I've still got the responsibility. I've got students, I've got people, I've got stuff to do, I've got shows to do like this one. You try, so you have to also trust that the people that you are working with or that you're involved with will understand. Sometimes you simply can't be there for them. So don't be needy. Help those people. And you yourself, like you know me, I've been calling you all week. Help. I'm not too shy to ask for help. I'm not too proud to ask for help. And so don't allow your feelings of oh, I don't want to put on them. I don't want to, it's too much to ask for somebody else. Voice your, cry for help. Help. If somebody can't help you, they will say so. Just make sure that when you're asking for help, and this is also important, when you're asking for help, it's important that you get help. You're not just asking just because, or just to try and get attention, or just because you're lazy and you don't want to do it anymore. Make sure that when you ask for help, you try to ask the right people. But if you know for instance, if you know your parents coming to live with you, my neighbor just had this situation. Her 89-year-old mother just came to live with her. And there are so many things that you can do prior to it happening. You can set things up, Meals on Wheels, getting involved with the church so that you've got somebody to come in once or twice a week to sit with that person. Get help. Don't be afraid to get help. So don't be embarrassed, and don't be embarrassed to say, I would really like to say yes, but I simply can't because I'm exhausted right now. Don't. So there's lots of ingredients in this bowl. Don't be afraid that people are going to think less of you, and please don't be afraid to fall off the pedestal, because if you didn't create the pedestal, then you're not going to get so hurt if you fall off it. It's other people who get hurt because they get disappointed in you. As you said, Al, expectations. People are, have those high expectations, right?
And Nettie has one more comment, and I think it's worth addressing for sure. She's talking about work and how challenging it is when you do have to work the hours for fear of being fired. And I think what we really, you don't want to leave your job, especially if you have obligations to people, but you can explore other opportunities while you're enduring those challenging situations, even at work, right?
Yes. And I think often people they put themselves in that situation because they're so keen and they're so willing and they're so lovely and they so want to help. There are all those other people out there who will take advantage of you. So when you start to say no, they get a bit shocked or they get a bit surprised. But you've got to have trust in your own self, and you've got to have trust that you're doing a good job. And if you're doing a good job and you lose your job because you said no, you were going to lose it anyway. So trust in yourself and trust that you're giving the most that you can give. But I think that we set ourselves up so often because we so love what we do, or we so, for instance, if you're a school teacher, you so love your kids. It's really hard to say no to kids. It's really hard for me to say no to my grandson. So you in a way, you set yourself up for it. You set yourself up for them to say, and can I have this? I think I might have said this the other week. My grandson, when he knew I was coming to New York, he said, Mosey, he said, I'm starting my first day of my first grade. Is it first grade? First year, first grade of school on such a date. Can you please be here for me? Well, I had planned to not be there, and I couldn't say no because he asked me so sweetly and he asked me so nicely. I said, of course, darling, of course I'll be there. And then he said, Mosey, could you be there, please, for me on my second day of my first grade? And I laughed. I said, yes, darling. He said, could you be there for my eighth day? And I said, um, this is where we draw the line. So you give a little, but you don't give your whole, don't, be careful, because otherwise, I mean, had I continued with this conversation of my grandson, continuing to say yes because I wanted to please him, and of course, I want him to love me more than he loves anybody else other than his mother, of course. So, I want to be that, that person. So I'm doing it for selfish reasons as well. Let's be clear about that. But I'm thinking, if I don't say no, I'll be staying there until Christmas, and I can't do that. So, it's fun to say yes. And sometimes it's fun to say yes when you don't need to say yes. But what we're saying here is learn to say no when it's an issue between your health, your well-being, your safety. Uh, Learn to say no and learn to ask for help. And if you cannot go anywhere else, I would put my faith in the Salvation Army, because they will bend over backwards to help anyone. But you see, they work in a team. So not everybody's saying yes all at the same time. They're all, so find a team around you. That's another ingredient, Al, don't you think? If you can get a team around you, a team of people who can help you, as well as, I think, as well.
And understand that sometimes one person will have to step up over the other. Lori just made a comment. If I had a tattoo, it would say, "To thine own self be true," which is really what this is about, right? Just making sure that
Yes, but
you're in the right place.
here's the thing though, and I understand that to your own self be true, but in certain circumstances, if you're a giver, if you're a healer, as I am, being true to myself means sharing that gift. So, it's not always compatible with saying no. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes you have to say yes because it's the right thing to do. And if you say yes because it's the right thing to do, no matter how exhausted you are, then you must insist that you make time for yourself so that you recoup, or you find a way to replenish your energy so that you can recoup. Because this is about, taking care of oneself. Because if you keep doing the right thing and you do the right thing for everyone all the time and you can't say no, eventually you have to do the right thing for yourself as well. It's important to do the right thing for yourself as well. And so you've got to always, even though you might be exhausted. I can remember we had a patient once. She was a client of mine. Her sister had been rushed into hospital, emergency. She was 8 months pregnant. She'd gone into a coma, and there was a risk of the baby and the mother both dying. And so my client called me in, and I actually went with 3 other people in my team. I was the only one allowed into the theatre where this woman was, but my team were outside and they were sending healing for me. And we were there from probably 12 o'clock at night until 6 or 7 in the morning, when finally they got a pulse back and so on and so forth. And then, they had to work with the baby as well. And finally everything sorted itself out. But when I walked out of there, I can tell you, I was so exhausted I could barely stand. And the doctors and the nurses, who were really doing their bit, I'm sure they felt the same way. But when you come away from a situation where you're sort of steeped in it, whatever it is, then it's find a place where you can then go, or find people that you can go to who will help you to replenish your energy. So that you're able and you're strong enough and you have the energy enough to, the next time there is a situation like that, you can deal with it without damaging yourself.
Yes, we're close to time, Rosemary. And speaking of giving to ourselves. I think both of us have had a little bit of a tiring week, right? So, so I
I
think
cannot even begin to go there with my week. The only thing I can say, Al, is everything is attitude.
exactly.
And boy, it's so hard sometimes to keep smiling. It's been physically a challenging week for me. Physically, it's been a very expensive week for me because I've had to deal with stuff. My air conditioning went. Everything's gone wrong this week, and then I did laugh at my sister Michelle because at some point her bed broke. Luckily, she wasn't in it at the time, and it's been one of those weeks that every time you turn around, something here and something there. You know, something's going on. What about your week, Al?
I think from the shoulder to just the craziness of doing multiple things at work and multiple things coming up all at the same time. It's been a tiring
Dealing
week.
with a family, 3 children.
Yeah, it's and stuff, health stuff with my son and all that stuff. It sometimes becomes challenging, but we don't say no to everything as attitude because we know how important it is, and we persevere and we enjoy doing it, right?
We do. We do. Do we have any other comments?
Um, nope, I think that's it. Lori says God only chooses his biggest and best warriors for his biggest fights. That's our last comment. Um,
Well, I was lucky in a way because my father was without a doubt a warrior. He was an army man for all of his life. He was tough, tough, tough. He would, he beat me up a couple of times really severely. Uh, I mean, I was terrified of him growing up. The punishments were tough punishments, and sometimes, it was hard to see. Sometimes they were unfair. I had 3 sisters, and I was the only one. For whatever reason, I was the only one. My father put a curfew on, 10 o'clock. Even when I was like 18 and 19, you're walking this door at 10 o'clock, and every time I walked in at night time, there he'd be sitting in his chair, and I couldn't win because if it was 2 minutes to 10, or if it was 2 minutes after 10, he would sit there in his chair with his arms folded, and he'd say, in his sort of sergeant voice, "When I say 10 o'clock, I mean 10 o'clock. I don't mean 2 minutes before, and I don't mean 2 minutes after." And you couldn't win. You didn't get brownie points if you were early. You had to be there on the strike of 10. And I learned a long time after that. And as I've said, I was the only one of 4 girls that he would do that to. But I learned I think he worried about me the most. He was extremely protective of me, and unable to say that. It was like, "Well, when I say 10 o'clock, I mean," this sort of thing. So, he was a warrior. He certainly taught me by his example to be a warrior. And my spirit guide Gregel, he is definitely a warrior. So we're sort of like this little warrior nation that we've got going on here. But not everybody can be a warrior, can they? Not everybody can, not everyone has, the ability to fight, to stand up and to fight. So for those of us who are warriors, Al, I think we have a more difficult time of saying no. I'm sort of throwing this back to you. We have a more difficult time saying no because we are also being warriors. We're also the protectors and the gatherers of souls. And we are the ones who can't stand unfairness or seeing injustice done. So it's sometimes harder for us to say no because of that, right?
yeah, I mean, I think for me, I think I'm more middle of the road. So I think I'm more. I am the earth sign, but I don't know that I'm the warrior because.
You're the nice person. You're nicer than I am.
But I do get fired up about injustice. I do have a really tough time saying no. I do have for being an Earth visionary, I have a probably more fight than most Earth visionaries have, or a good amount of fight as far as Earth visionaries go. So I get it, and
Well,
understand where you're coming from.
well, you know that I'm an Earth warrior,
Yeah,
and I've learned, I have absolutely no problem saying no. However, I, I will, again, you've got to assess, will this damage me? If I say yes, will this damage me? If I say yes, will this exhaust me? Will it deplete my energy? So I don't often say no, but I do say no when necessary. If I'm thinking about what is good for me, because I've got to put myself first in some of these situations, because if I don't put myself first, nobody else is going to. Because
yeah, Rosemary, what you just said was really, really potent. If you say yes, will it damage me? If I say yes, will it deplete me? I think those questions have to be really at the top of that bowl and that
they've
recipe,
got to be
right?
right in there in
Yeah,
those
yeah,
ingredients.
yeah.
So I think, I think we all sort of, perhaps another ingredient is take a step back and think before you say yes, because so many people automatically will say it and then regret saying it afterwards. So before you agree to something, or before you say yes of course to something because you feel it's the right course of action, just don't say yes before you've thought about it for a moment or two. And then you can always come back to that person and say, well, let me think about it and I'll let you know, which also gives you more time to think about it. But think about how damaging it is to you. Does it interfere with your life? For instance, I would never say yes to someone. I'm going to spend time with my daughter and my grandson. I'm not going to say yes to anybody who interferes with that. So, and that's being purely selfish on my part. However, if I were not there for my grandson, it would be very upsetting for him as well. So, think before you act, think before you speak, think before you agree to anything, think before you say yes, think before you say no. And I think
I think we're pretty good to wrap up, right, Rosemary?
I I think, yeah, I think who knew that we could talk for so long about saying no. I know that you're off doing something or another. You're in a Starbucks. It's not been too bad. We've heard a few background noises there, but I really do appreciate the fact that you found the time and you found a place to do this. So I'd say thank you to that. So thank you to my co-host Al Pisano for doing a great job once again. If you out there would like to talk about a topic, have a topic, or even come on the show, we'd love to have you on. If you'd rather not be on camera, but you'd love to have a voice, you can do that too. Please email info. I almost forgot. Info at everythingisattitude.com, or you can email me, Rosemary at rosemaryantaltea.com. So if you have a subject, that would be great. We shall see you here, I think next Friday. I'm not quite sure where I shall be, Al, but I'll try to make it for next Friday. It's only an hour after all. So I'll try and do that. I'll probably be in New York City at the time. And we shall be, of course, live on YouTube on Thursday morning. We'll be all over the place, won't we? We'll be here, there, and everywhere. And so until we see you again, thank you very much for joining us. We hope you enjoyed this discussion. And we'll see you all in the next few days. And in the meantime, please, 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 it is Friday. Have a very blessed rest of the day and have a really wonderful weekend, everyone.